It's the state of the dungeon. It's a video that Rob does about his games. Yeah! Hello, friends. I am Rob. Welcome to my basement lair for another State of the Dungeon address. This for the game that took place on September 2nd, 2021. The game, The Darkest Dream, Part 1 of the Red Star Rising campaign, using a modified version of 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. All present members of the group were present. Basically, the group was intact except for the one person who is still absent because of his employment. But otherwise, all 5 players were here. And they had just gotten done with a nasty stretch of dungeon at the bottom of a well that they had discovered and entered into a little mini dungeon with all kinds of fun encounters. For details on that, go back to the last 2 dungeon addresses and you'll see those stories unfold for you. They were now out of the dungeon with their newfound friend, who has been bitten by spiders, drained of enough blood that he is sickened and unable to get out on his own, so the group helped him out, because they're nice folk that way. And he has pledged that he is eternally grateful, and if he can do anything for them, he certainly will. What he can do for them, they're not really sure, because, well, they're the adventuring types and he is not, but, you know, we'll see. So, at any rate, the group tightened up everything and prepared to make their trek back to camp. Not a very long trip. So they were going through the woods, and who should they encounter but Borag? He was coming after them, and he had his armor on, and he had a large axe. They had seen him use this axe. It is the thing of nightmares if it's used upon you. Borag looked grim and determined, and when he saw the group coming back with wounds, bandaged up, a little unsteady on their feet from casting all of their spells through, well, he wasn't happy. And he gruffly demanded that they follow him back to camp, which they did meekly. He got back to camp and he sized up their situation, and he immediately began to tear into them. Because, quite honestly, they said they had some business, but he didn't think they were going to go into a dungeon and get all beat up. He thought they might explore, investigate something, but they clearly had gotten into a big fight. And he was reacting as a protective parent would. However, Borag was not able to deliver his full, furious remarks because his wife, Carnivalle, who is his partner in the leadership of the Blue Veil troop, stepped in. And she told him to calm down and go and inspect the wrestling ring to make sure that it's ready for the day. She would take care of these naughty children. Borag actually seemed to pity them, and he left. Carnivalle had them all line up, and she gave them a strict criticism in each. Now, Carnivalle and Borag are veterans. They've been young once, they know what adventuring is like, and they could see that the group handled themselves fairly well. They also saw some areas that might need correcting. The last thing they want to do is spoil any sense of adventure for the group, so instead the critique was on how it appeared that their adventure had fared. First, she turned to Hanataz, who looked scared. Well, she said, all of your wounds are from the front. Pity you're not wise enough to come back and get armor on if you think you're going to get into a fight. And we have armor in the camp. You spar in it. You know that you could get into something to protect you if your friends' lives are on the line. But all your wounds are on the front. You did what a fighter should do. You didn't run away. You protected them, and from where those wounds are, I'm guessing the others have patched you up to the point where you were able to continue into the fray, and you, I'm assuming, accorded well of yourself, and he did. He was quite effective. She didn't say anything about his excellent bow shot, because she wasn't there. She didn't see what he did with his missile weapons, but she did see how he had been wounded. And again, it wasn't because he was running away when he got felled. So, she assumed that since everybody else was alive, Hanataz had a part of that. She then went to Glyn. Glyn had also gotten badly hurt, although I believe a lot of his was spider venom. She sized him up and said, well, Mr. Archer, your skill with that bow is renowned, but it looks like you actually learned that if something happens to Hanataz, it's your job to step in and be his side companion. As long as you guys are a group, you need to watch him and not just stand back and shoot. If it comes to it, you're perhaps the second best fighter in this group. It's time to pull out your sword. And it looks like you did that. Well done. And he's kind of surprised, but he took it. Yeah, I did good. Turned out I'm pretty darn good with a sword. Then she turned to Crendon. Crendon the Bard. She saw that Crendon had been beat up a bit. She said, so, your silver tongue didn't get you out of this one, did it? You also need to learn wisdom. The wisdom to know that their job is to be in the front line. Your job is to support them. If they both fell, then yes, your job would be to step up and protect the rest. But quite honestly, maybe it's you need a bit of extra incentive. Maybe some weapon training and armor to get you a little bit closer to where you need to be. And he's like, oh, shucks. Because, yeah, he took some shots. And then she turned to Brandel. And she said, so, you look like you fell down a pit. And she said, you look like you fell down into a hole. Because she did. She was muddy. She was dusty. She had a black eye from falling on the hard pit floor. And she's like, yeah. She's like, so, hopefully you learn to allow the warriors in your group to stand in the front and not take that kind of a beating. And she's like, yep. She said, how much magic do you have left? Can you cast anything besides cantrips? She's like, nope, just cantrips. She's like, yes. So, despite the fact the whole day is ahead of us, you've spent all of your spells on this little venture, that you ran off on this venture without telling anybody. Yep. Then she turned to Vanessa, and she said, so, how many spells do you have left? How much magic can you weave? Just cantrips. Yep. But you don't look like you're hurt at all. Nope, I'm fine. Despite the fact that you're trained to fight about as well as anybody, and if anybody gets hurt is least likely to get hurt in the fight, it's probably should be Brandel and Crendon, but you're fine and they're beat up. Yep, I've got armor now. She was not going to take this verbal abuse. For whatever reason, it slid right off her, which really started to get to Kalasse. So she says, okay, looks like you're going to be sharing extra weapon training with Crendon, because you're just not getting this, that you also need to take your role in the group responsibly. And she's like, what? Everyone's alive? So, she said, so, I have 3 spellcasters who can't cast any magic except for their most basic elementary cantrips. And we've got a full day of what is usually the roughest time for the Carnivalle, the last day, when emotions flare to a head on a day that's already ill-aspected because of Dark Tide coming. I see no other way around it, but you are all going to have to learn some new Hanataz magic. You are going to have to travel the Azure Road. So, she turned to Brother Anton, who had healed everybody, and she said, could you go and tell Mother Sylvenza that we need the bottle? And he took off. And they're all sweating this out, and he comes back with a bottle, and Vestia is following him, and she's protesting loudly. She's insisting that this is an unnecessary approach. The need isn't great enough to warrant the risks, which puts everybody in a good mood with this. But Carnivalle is doing this partially to again, teach and to kind of punish them for their running off to a dungeon, even though the outcome was great, even though they killed an evil that would have afflicted the area for some time to come, and certainly was a threat to the troop while they were there. Doing it irresponsibly, running off without telling anybody, especially after that first encounter, not coming back is the lesson she wanted to drill in. So they all took turns drinking from the bottle. All of them swooned from drinking from the bottle, but for Brandel and for Vanessa, it was a super power nap. They were out for about 10 minutes. They woke up supercharged with energy, and they had their spell slots back, but they were warned. They have gone down the Azure Road, which is something only the Hanataz know about. This is top secret if others find out about it. This is breaking the rules of magic in its own way. Something Jinx probably taught them. But if you do this more than once, you risk possibly death or being completely cut off from the Everflow, from the Xaythus. Pretty grim warning. None of them want to do this again. The thing is, Crendon took it badly. This began a night of Crendon proving that there are dice gods and that they hate the player of Crendon Char. Because I have not seen in a very long time one person roll so many ones so consistently over the course of a night. It was, to a less experienced and mature player, it would have been a thing of horrors. To his credit, the player rolled with it pretty well, understanding that sometimes glorious, rememberable things can come out of the worst of failures. So he rolled with it. He rolled a 1 on his saving throw. They all had save against their prime spellcasting attribute. So then I had to roll a Constitution saving throw just to see if there are any side effects that stick. And he rolled another 1. So then I rolled for the severity of it. And it wasn't the absolute worst. He was not cut off from spellcasting, which really would have sucked as a bard. No, that didn't happen to him. Instead, what happened was his tongue actually turned to a pliable silver, an organic silver, which made his talking a little rough at first, but it is flexible, and as he gets accustomed to it, he'll be able to use it. But if he has to cast any spells on that day, he has to make a performance roll to get by the handicap of having a thick tongue that he's not used to yet. And the player actually role-played out having this tongue, and it was pretty funny. And it went pretty well. But he now has this definitely recognizable feature that his tongue is actually silver. So, however, the actual result was Vestia actually cast a couple of spells, dispelling spells, to drain off the magic that was recoiling inside of him. So she saved him. She's now down some magic, but well, it's what you have spells for when you're the Hanataz. Sometimes it's to put out the fires that may come up. And in this case, it certainly helped. So, the group was restored. Brother Anton had cast a spell and healed everybody. So, everybody was in good shape. So, we began the night. Now, Borag came back, and he told them a few last-minute instructions. First of all, they should pay special attention to the gambling tent. On the last day, when people are losing the stakes they came with, it can get really contentious. And fights can frequently break out. Others of the Frenta will be around helping smooth things out over there, but he wants their eye to be in that direction as often as possible, just in case something comes up. Likewise, the group wanted to go and talk to Mother Salvenza about what they'd seen down in the crypt. They'd, of course, debriefed themselves to Borag and Kalnase, but, perhaps Mother Salvenza should know about this necromancer that they found the effigy of, and the whole dungeon's existence, quite honestly. So, they had determined to do that. The first thing they did, of course, was to follow the instructions that they had, and they went over to the gambling tents. They had also, in passing, heard that out of the rest of the young Hanataz, about their peers, who were also disposed among the Carnivalle, taking care of things, Borag and Kalnase's son, Theros, was kind of in the doghouse for something that had happened the night before. And they later found out that it had something to do with a local girl who found the very thick and rugged and manly Theros to be very attractive. Perhaps made him an offer he couldn't refuse. And since angry fathers can be one of the major problems that the Hanataz have to deal with, Theros is he's been chewed out and disciplined for his lack of self-control. He's guarding the food and ale for the rest of the day. He's not happy about that. He wanted to roam around and solve problems. And also, maybe they didn't notice, but he had a special little thing going with Hananan, and that here he's the fighter who gets to be in a group that takes on this massive grizzly bear, and then also gets to go on a dungeon adventure, and he's just getting in trouble because he had a liaison with a local girl. So this has not been his most glorious outing for a young man who perhaps has dreams about being the Bravda of the Blue Veil Troop at some point in the future because of his parentage, but also because he's a powerful fighter and not a bad leader. But yeah, this isn't going too well for him. This isn't a strong enmity. They're peers. They train together, they drill together, but he's a little annoyed that Hananan is getting to go off and have all these adventures, and he's stuck guarding the pies and the beer. So the group goes and they check out the gambling tent on their first circuit, and they see that there's a number of people, but generally these folks aren't really looking for a fight. The fights come basically when people's passions rise up when they've lost all their money, and they're upset, and sometimes the fists swing. It's kind of the way of things, and most people understand it. Of course, it's frowned upon, and that person they will be ejected from the Carnivalle, usually physically. Considering the crop of healthy young warriors who are a little eager for a dust up in the Hanataz, they take a lot of garbage, and when they get a chance to deliver a little bit of punishment back, as long as they don't cross the line, it happens. So the group did go through, and as early in the morning as they were there, this was only a little bit after the Carnival had opened up, there were still quite a few people outside. But one of the things they noticed right away was one of the masters of the gambling, who runs one of the tents. He happens to specialize in card games. His name is Tevrin. Good-looking guy. Well, he was stuffing a purse up his sleeve, and then he gets approached by a comely young half-elven lass. And yes, I hope that you appreciate the art of the Gooey Cube product. Some really amazing pictures. And she comes up to him and she gives him a big kiss, which knocks his socks off, and also stops him from noticing that she picks his pocket, steals another purse. However, the two nature people who are there, as watching the whole thing, they see this amazingly rare butterfly, and they're like, "Oh wow, that butterfly is awesome!" Nature! Both of them rolling a 1. It was a funny night. All the other people in the group noticed that she picked his pocket. even though she rolled pretty well, well, they noticed. So Hananan immediately gives chase. Okay, as I said, Glynn didn't really notice, and Vanessa didn't notice. Brandel's like, "Hey, thief!" And she tries to get Tevrin to notice, but he's stunned from this forward greeting. And she's very attractive, and he just, wah. So he's running, and Crendon tries to run after them. But remember, I said Crendon was not having the best night. In his pursuit roll, rolls a 1. It was so bad. So bad. Every time I asked him to roll, I almost felt bad for it. But how did he screw up? Well, he ran smack into a halfling farmer. And because of the size disparity, he, he's running, and there's the halfling, and punk! It was a low blow for Crendon and a headache for the old farmer. Which took Crendon out of the race as he was gathering himself up. The halfling farmer looked like he was, that's not the first time that's happened to me. And one of the Frenta gave him a few drink vouchers to kind of cover up for Crendon's faux pas of running down a customer. But Hananan is racing with her. Glynn snaps out of it, and he hairs off in a different direction. He kind of runs a bit of a parallel and around to the outside of the camp, out into the forest where he knows the terrain. She is running through the crowd. Hananan, big as he is following her and unerringly gaining on her, which surprises her as he's doing this. Finally, she decides she's going to try to break out of the camp and hopefully lose him in the woods. She did not know that the great jungle panther that is Glynn was already in the woods. So as she comes running along, he pops out and she smacks right into him. She sprawls, but when Glynn tries to apprehend her, it doesn't go very well. Turns out that she's really quick, and she's quite physically capable. So while she's not fighting, she's urgently trying to get away. And that's when Hananan comes in like a linebacker on an unsuspecting quarterback. Comes in, clears her out, and decides he needs to grapple her. And he rolls exceptionally well, and she rolled exceptionally poorly. So he puts her in a vicious cross-faced chicken wing figure 4 leg lock. She is bowed in half, and all of her limbs are tied up, and Hananan has just got her at his mercy. Not where she wanted to be, quite honestly, and she tapped out. I surrender. I'll give back what I took. And they're like, okay. Not quite sure how to deal with things, but eventually, when everybody kind of gathered up around her, like, okay, we can let her go. So they let her out, and she slipped out most of the way herself. She's quite capable as a thief. And she said, all right, you caught me. Here you go. Tossed him the purse. And they interrogated her. Who are you? Well, I'm just a gal making her way in the world. But I was looking to score a little money to ease my travel out of this town because I'm leaving. I was hoping to get one more, and I got caught. So they took her dagger, and she actually rewarded Hananan for catching her by giving him a ring. It's a nice ring. So Hananan took the ring to himself. Let's see if he attunes to it. But, yeah, so they're like, okay. At first I thought, why, she's really good. She would be great with us. I mean, she could pick pockets on people we want her to pick pockets on, and she's pretty, so, that helps to draw people in as well. What wouldn't she do for us? And then they realized the Hananan are a close-knit family, and she's an outsider. She's probably too old and set in her ways to be indoctrinated into the group. She has no blood touch to make the group a shelter for her. She'd basically be a prisoner. They'd be trying to drink the Kool-Aid. That doesn't work very well, and she would probably not be accepted by Borag, Kalnase, or the rest of the elders. So they're like, okay, well, you can't steal from us. We're gonna have to kick you out of the camp. She's like, I understand. And she left without any real fanfare. They watched her leave on her word that she was going to take off, and I'm pretty happy with that. They resolved the encounter without extra bloodshed or anything like that, so things went well. Speaking of bloodshed, then they went off to, since the tent was fairly close, they went off to go see Mother Selvenza, the seeress of the group, of the Hanataz. Of this troop, at least. And when they went off to see her, some guy was staggering out of her tent, just seemingly lost in wonder. She came out and she waved the group over, butting them ahead of the next person in line. And she told them that she had seen a vision, that something dark and scary was lurking in the woods. They need to be extra careful. Also, there are several people that are currently in the Carnivalle who are killers and have bloodshed on their minds. They need to be very conscious about what's going on, keeping themselves and other people safe. But also there's one other thing they could help with, if that's okay. Turns out there's a group of acolytes from one of the local temple. And they came and they got a prophecy from her. She saw for them, and they declared her a charlatan and wouldn't pay. She wants them to go and collect what they owe, however they want to. Now, obviously, they can't go over and get into a fight, because they would be starting it, and that would be bad. It's a good way to get in trouble with the law enforcement. Crendon goes, I got this. So he goes over, and I can't help, maybe everybody else felt that little pit of doom settling into their stomach when he decided to do this, but as good as his luck had been that night, it probably wasn't going to end well. But as he was moving over towards these acolytes, who they recognized as following the god of prophecy and the patron of magic users, a variety of other things too, but it was prophecy and secrets and power through knowledge. And they were talking amongst themselves and it sounded like they were planning on leaving. So, but as he was going over, this other woman comes up with a group of locals. She's a tall, strong woman, and she's mad. And she gets right in Mother Selvenza's face. And she points her finger down at her and calls her a fraud and tells anyone who would listen not to give her their money, because she's just going to tell them lies, she's going to make things up, and get them to throw away their lives. Now, Brandel realized that maybe we need to be wise about this, so she pressed her for details. Well, it turned out that this woman had gone, her husband had come to see Mother Selvenza earlier in the day, and he asked her about possibly having a future of leaving his life as a blacksmith and staying with her to go and learn how to become a bard and become famous and wooed by beautiful women all over. Yeah, she was upset. And the rest of the group kind of clustered around Mother Selvenza because she seemed helpless. Why? As this woman was threatening and criticizing her, Mother Selvenza started to go into a trance, which usually presaged when she was having a vision. So she couldn't defend herself. The group surrounded her very quickly. And as things started to kind of go poorly, Glynn attempted to use a different kind of diplomacy. He jumped on her, not Mother Selvenza, the large woman, Olga. and climbed her like a spider monkey. He attempted to reach around her neck and grapevine around her waist with his legs, and Glyn is an elf and he's very nimble. She wasn't expecting this and she fell back, but he twisted out of the way so she didn't land on top of him. At the same time, Brandel, realizing that there's all these other people who could be starting trouble, cast a sleep spell on the crew that this woman had brought with her. And she put 5 out of the 6 to sleep. They all dropped. Now, all his friends just suddenly dropped to the ground without having a finger laid on them, and he's a suspicious local. He immediately starts crying out necromancy and declaring that she's just killed his friends, and starts running off for the guards. This was an escalation of sorts, certainly. The weird thing, though, nobody really heard what came with Mother Sylvenza and her vision, except that Hananan seemed to understand what she said, and it sounded pretty bad. It's a prophecy about black things and evils coming up, and none of it good. So later on, he wrote it down for them so that they could kind of get the gist of what she had said, since he was the only one who could understand her. So, those priests see a disturbance. They see a number of villagers falling. They walk over. And I checked. I had them make arcana checks to see if they could detect a simple sleep spell. It's a common wizard spell. And these clerics follow the god who is the patron of magic users. And all of them, except for their leader, fail their roll. Fortunately, the leader made hers. And she determined that, yeah, it's a simple sleep spell, guys. They're all still alive. Nobody needs to worry. This was actually her using magic to stop a confrontation, not to kill people. And it was actually probably one of the most honorable things that could have been done with magic given the circumstances. And as a result, nothing had to come to conflict. Glyn attempted to disentangle himself with a certain amount of grace and make it seem like he hadn't launched an attack. That didn't work, but, you know, they had to respect his nimbleness. The townsfolk were woken up again, and they kind of took Olga off to the side. With everything that had happened, and these clerics now here interposing themselves, and eventually a guard was summoned. These guards are sharp. Uh-huh. Yep, well, it looks like there's no fighting going on, so I can go back to guard. Takes off. Great guards they've got here in this town. So, party has done their job. They stopped any problems from coming up. Mother Sylvenza claims that she is weary and goes back to her tent. The group goes into the tent to check up on her, and she is visibly drained. She's happy for them that they did the job, and probably about as notably throughout the conflict too, lest I forget it. Yeah, remember Crendon and his bad luck streak? Well, what actually shook down with the Acolytes, why it took them a little while to react when the spellcasting was going on, was he went up and he picked one of the clerics' purses off them. And as far as picking pockets, we were all just looking with trepidation. And he rolled, and he got a 24, 25. He did brilliantly. He was the best cut purse at that moment. I'm like, okay. Now all you have to do is disentangle yourself. He's like, am I dressed up like a I know I'm not performing. Am I just dressed up like a... No. You're dressed in your Hanataz clothes. Your clothes are loud. They clash because you want eyes on you, usually. So he had to roll a stealth roll, and that's when the one hit. So he tripped, and the purse that he had in his hand flew out of his hand in full view of the clerics. And the clerics go, wait a minute. Whose purse is that? And he's like, "Oh no, it's mine. It's mine. I dropped it. I was just checking my coins." And they're like, "Isn't that the symbol of our god on that?" And he's like, "No. Okay, I'm going to make a sleight of hand check to shuffle my own personal pouch in with this new pouch, tuck that one away." I'm like, "Well, all 5 of them are watching you." Yup. Considering his luck streak, it was probably one of the boldest moves we've seen so far in this game. For a simple act of skullduggery and conning. I'm like, "Okay, but they're all watching you. You're rolling with disadvantage." Okay. And I'm just like, if he rolls a 1, there's going to be blood spilled. He still ends up with an 18, which blows through their perception checks. He manages to make this con work. He's like, "See, this is the purse. It's mine." And they're like, "Yeah, that doesn't have our symbol on it, you fool. Come on, let's get out of here. They're bad at prophecy and apparently bad at just walking. Klutz." And they walk off, and he pulled off the con, and they only turned around and came back when the sleep spell went off, so they're 1 purse lighter. I don't think he ever even looked in that purse. He just did it to do it. So, when they went in to see Mother Sylvenza, he's like, "Look what I got." And she's like, "Good, keep it. That's your pay for doing this for me." It's more important that they didn't have it. But she was clearly stricken with fatigue and weariness. She actually told the patrons that it was going to take her a little while before she would be able to see anybody else, which is extraordinarily uncommon for Mother Sylvenza. She is absolutely as reliable as iron. But after she's had a true prophecy, she can be drained. So, yeah, she's not feeling it. So they went off and found Brother Anton and asked him to check in on her, see how she's doing. Brother Anton, of course, went right over to find her because, well, she's the spiritual center of the group. It's important that she's tended to, so he goes off right away. So after this, they decide that, well, it would be a good thing to maybe go back to the gambling tent and we'll continue checking around. So they go back to the gambling tent and they see the great Clasby, who is a fine-looking man, very well dressed, with a loud jacket, and to complement his bright red skin and horns and little devilish goatee, and smoking a big cigar. And he seems to be doing a fine job, taking care of everything and running his games, and he nods pleasantly to them. But the other one of the game runners, Freasha Firehair, accosted them with a dire warning that one of the Frenta, the not quite adult but young Hanataz who assist her, overheard some patrons talking about a hideous plan that they were planning to unleash. They were going to murder 2 clerics and blame it on the Hanataz. Their plan was to sequester them off away from other people and then find some way to get them at a disadvantage and kill them. And then call for the guards and point to the bodies. These men had close-shaven hair. One of them had a series of scars on his face. They were all armored and armed, which is not common. So they were to be on the lookout for these. The clerics, on the other hand, were fairly easy to spot. They are the clerics of the goddess of autumn and harvest and the life giver. So they're generally positive influences in the community. But these 2 particularly had an issue with the Hanataz in general, insisting that people give up on their licentious ways and give their money to the gods who bless them with their bounty and ensure that they continue to watch over them rather than give your money to these heathens. Well, the Hanataz have a policy, generally. If you're a local cleric and you come in and you want to harangue us, that's fine as long as you pay to get in. You can do that. They aren't going to stop you, and quite honestly, this is not a new thing. So these two doing this, nothing out of the ordinary. But it made the group a little bit less eager to protect them. Slightly, perhaps. But not indeed. They were going to make sure that they didn't get killed. So what they did was they shadowed them. First they tried to walk up to them and talk, and that didn't go so well. Especially it seemed that Crendon really, really, really wanted to have a conversation with the Life-Giver cleric, who was willing to debate, but the lady that he was with kept pulling him away, saying, no, there's no point in arguing with them. We need to go off and continue doing our good work. So they continued to walk around the Carnivalle. And the group is like, what are we going to do? So they followed them blatantly for an hour. Just bodyguarding them, basically. And eventually Brandel and a few others realized, while we're doing this, we're not doing our jobs of patrolling. This is just going to get us into a lot of trouble with Boreg and Kalnase. If they see us just walking around after these two, what are we going to do? Say there may be a plot against them? And if we do this, the plot will probably never come because we're 6 armed people with these 2 clerics. We need to be cleverer than this. So, Glyn decided he was going to go get a vantage point in the tallest tree in the woods bordering the camp. And there was one, a particularly nice elm, would give him a pretty good view of half of the Carnivalle at the very least. The other option was to go and climb on top of the big top, and that would leave him with no cover, even though he would have an excellent view of the area. So he goes off to the forest, because that's kind of Glyn's thing. The rest of them try to be stealthy. Did I say try? Yes, I did. Because one thing after the other just did not seem to work. The first botch, I believe, came from Crendon again. Just clumsily staggering into the 2 clerics, and they verbally berated him. And he again tried to defend himself verbally and got shot down again. They were not having any of his sass. The second one was Vanessa. See, Crendon rolled a 1, so what he did was he cut a bush and was holding up in front of him for cover. It was as ridiculous as it sounds. Then Vanessa got to roll a 1 for her stealth. So she grabbed the bush and she started loudly lamenting that this bush was cut down in its prime of its life, and trying to act like this was the natural way that she would act, not that she's still stalking these 2 clerics. That didn't work either. So, but one of the things that while they were trying to be stealthy, the clerics were moving, and that meant that Glyn was losing his view of them. So he got down and started stealthily running around the camp, across the front of the camp, down across Sellers Row, but outside of the Carnivalle. And he was running along the front of it, and eventually he runs to the forest on the far side, across from the road that goes in front of the Carnivalle to lead all the people to it. And as he's going along, he notices that there's somebody in the woods he is paralleling the others. He is dressed somewhat stealthily, and he has a crossbow and a number of blades on him. And he's like, ooh, this could be the assassin I'm trying to stop. And he had short cropped hair, and he's wearing leather armor, and he has weapons. So, yeah, this is one of those guys. So Glyn, in his own inimicable way, stalks him in the forest. An elven ranger stalking him in the forest. Poor guy didn't have a chance. Glyn was upon him fairly quickly, as he is, again, trying to parallel the group, and whips out a dagger and shanks him. Didn't roll the best for damage, it must be said. But he hurt him, and he did get that first solid blow in, and the group some of them heard the grunt of pain from the guy getting stabbed in the kidney. And most of them turned. Of course, Crendon couldn't hear a thing, because I don't think Crendon made a single perception roll all night. Mostly disastrously, to be fair. And Vanessa, likewise, saw butterflies. Brandel saw butterflies. So they were not in on this. Hananan heard. Hananan charged from where he heard the grunt. And Vanessa runs behind him. So it's Glyn versus this unknown assailant, going mano a mano. And Glyn is by far much more proficient fighter than this guy is. Even though he is not shooting him with his bow, which is how he likes to conduct combat, he short sword against this guy's short sword, and he has this nice Seric iron short sword now. He's pretty happy with it. This guy didn't stand much of a chance. So, stabs him one more time. Again, not a lot of damage. His dice were cold. In the next round, another shot, just cut up his stomach. He did not kill him. He didn't sever the vitals, but he's bleeding all down his front. He's badly hurt. He's one sock to the jaw from being out cold. Wobbly, woozy. That's when he stabs poor Glyn in the shoulder, because it's how it has to be, it seems. And Glyn didn't like that, but that's when Hananan comes in and just clotheslines the guy. Now, Glyn whipped his... No, Hananan comes over and he grabs the guy's hand with the sword in it, squeezes, and the sword pops out. Because Hananan is a beast, huge and imposing when it comes to fighting. Glyn sweeps the guy's legs out from under him, causing him to fall prone. And then Glyn just moves over and kneels on the guy's neck and knocks him out. Hananan hears that there's more struggle, because why? Vanessa looks and sees the two fighters of the group taking on one already injured guy. She's like, you guys have this. So she goes back to the camp, and with her perception, she sees those two guys that were mentioned in that plot who are moving out themselves and breaking towards the trees on the other side of the camp. She alerts the rest of them to their flight. Now, do you think Brandel or Crendon, both very intelligent, very perceptive people, could see these two? No, they couldn't. But they could see the direction Vanessa was urgently waving them towards, so they started heading in that general direction. Not exactly the right place. So Vanessa harumphs and casts an entangle spell as they get into the trees, which all of a sudden everyone could see the greenery just go, which I imagine has got to look great. And it catches one of the guys. It actually catches both of them for a moment. So they start running up, and to seal the deal, because Brandel knows that Entangle is not a permanent spell and that they can fight their way out of it, she casts a sleep spell on the area where the Entangle spell is, synergizing their magic. She didn't roll all that well, though, and doesn't knock either of the assailants out. So they're a little tougher. But she tried. So, however, Crendon kept on going. And Crendon decides he is going to approach and, get into position. And he rolls a 1. He doesn't exactly get track of how far that entangle spell goes, and he gets himself stuck in the entangle, because that's the kind of night Crendon is having. It's just cosmically perfect in its own way. So he's dangling there. One of the thugs had broken out. Hananan was paralleling through the trees, running along, while Glyn was subduing the other. And the assailant comes out of the entangle and boom, into Hananan. It's not even close. Hananan is barely moved where the guy flops to the ground. Well, Hananan is a little sore because he badly missed on a punch to knock out the first assailant. And now he's been smacked hard by this guy running into him. They're trying very hard not to kill people. And this is what they're supposed to be doing, really. Although these guys have honest-to-goodness weaponry, and it would be self-defense, but they're still trying. And the guy is down, and the strangest fight is kind of breaking out as this guy is trying to fight, and nobody is hitting very well. The combat is a confused mess. This is certainly not textbook. But eventually, as it is getting quite late in the night, one person is subdued in the entangled, although, to be fair, so is Crendon. But Crendon could, if he wanted to, use some of his magics and subdue the other guy. Vinas had run up by this point. Brandel was moving up into range. Hananan was right there and was completely fresh in the fight. I just made it a party victory. The guy was subdued by the rest of the group. It was nothing to be gained by playing it out. So they have captured these 3 assailants, at least 2 of which are directly implicated in this plot against the 2 clerics. And yeah, they all succeeded. Minimal damage, although Glyn might disagree with that. But yeah, they've stopped several engagements that have taken place on this rather eventful last day of the Carnivalle. So that's what happened as it played out. Lots of laughs to be had, certainly, but I think people are really getting into their characters, and they're proving that the game is a lot different when you get to play the characters for session after session and get to know the characters and develop the characters and understand their motivations, their plots, and desires. Something that I intentionally didn't let them really do in the first games, but now they're getting to it, and I think they're really starting to fall in love with these characters, which is great. And I would definitely have to say, if we're going to be picking MVPs, even though you could say he was the least effective, at finding ways to continue to be effective and not let general horrible plotting failure get him down, Crendon was the MVP of that last one, and when we play again, he will be getting a GUI reward. Just to balance out the cosmic scales a little bit. Hopefully he burns some sage, puts some blessed oil on his dice and lets them cure for a week so that he doesn't get wiped out in the superhero game next week. So, but that is how it went in this, my dungeon, and the 2nd of September 2021. Thank you for joining me. It was a fun ride, and we're all enjoying this tremendously. And again, if you are interested in this particular adventure, it can be had from the fine folks at GUICube at GUICube.com. And if you get this adventure, it comes in a box with all this fantastic art and lots of beautiful handouts and things. So it's really nice. We're really having a good time with this one. So thank you again, one and all. Until next time, I'm Rob. This has been my State of the Dungeon address. Until this next time we meet, farewell.